Hello everyone and welcome to Blank First Page. My name is Lucas. So today I've got a very interesting pen set to share with you. The set itself is about 40 years old. It was bought in Paris. This isn't mine, I'm borrowing it. And it is a dip pen set. So there's 10 different nibs in here, there's a nib holder, and there's 4 different inks. Many of these nibs haven't even been used before. Some of the inks have, but there's a lot to explore here. I've never used a dip pen myself. I'm not a calligrapher, I'm not a writer, I'm not an artist. I don't really have the opportunity to sit and do something as intentional as a dip pen requires. And I love those type of processes where it's slow and sort of mindful in this way. But in terms of using a dip pen, I've never done that. So as you can see, I've got a few things I'm going to be showing. You will go through the contents of the case itself. We'll be using some fire, which is always fun. And I'll be starting a brand new notebook, which I bought in Japan. Starting off with the box itself, I'll flip it open for dramatic effect. So with apologies in advance to the French language for anything that I'm going to pronounce horribly. This box is from Jean-Pierre Lepin, I think, or Lepin, I'm not sure. It's a nice hardwood showcase box within which we've got this army of nibs. And this whole thing comes out like so. So this is, I'm guessing, intended if you actually use these things, you'd actually have this on your desk, which is very nice. Here's the nib holder, which makes a very nice effect when you turn it. It's also like some hardwood that's been turned and also carved. That's where the nibs are held. We've got 10 nibs to go through here. Somehow I think of a chess set when I'm looking at this. It's like little sculptures. We've got here 4 different inks. And the brand is J. Herbin, or I think Jacques Herbin. They claim to be the oldest fountain pen ink maker, but who knows? I don't know how you verify that. But in any case, they definitely have been around for a long time, and they are still around. You can still buy their current inks. We've got a black, my favorite. We've got a blue black, got a violet, purpley one, and we've got a red. Bring these back into frame because when you're using dip pen nibs of this kind, you have to clean the surface in some way before you use them for the first time, because there's these oils and things that get put on them in the manufacturing process to give them kind of longer shelf life, I guess. And if you don't clean that off, the ink doesn't function as it should on the nib. So it'll either run dry too quickly, it won't flow down the nib as it should. So you have to clean that surface oil somehow. And you can just use some surgical spirit or something and wipe them clean. Or you can run them through a flame, and that does a similar thing. I don't have surgical spirit, and that is the much more boring option. So we're going to just run a flame through these nibs to burn off that oil. I guess sounds like it shouldn't work, but it seems fun, and any excuse to use some fire is always welcome. I am going to wipe these down with a paper towel just in case there's any sort of soot that gets left on the nib. Can't imagine that is much better than having oil on the nib. Right, now to write on, I've got this A4 size notebook that I bought in Japan. I know that because I marked it, not on the first page, you will note. And it's brand new. I love this. There's a brand that makes these kinds of notebooks. I don't actually know what the brand is. Maybe it's Life, maybe it's part of the Life stationery sort of group of brands, but I'm not sure. I like this tape that gets put on there. Maybe it's for like marking, for archiving. If this isn't the Life stationery brand and you know what it is, please let me know. It kind of looks like just something you'd use for school, which I like, but it is really nicely designed. I love this kind of minimalistic, very practical design. I'm going to open it somewhere in the middle here. Now there's 10 nibs here and 4 inks, and I'm not going to go through 40 combinations to show what every ink looks like on every nib. I'll take this largest nib to start with, and I will use every color on it so that we can lay down a nice thick swath, if that's how you say it, of each color. And then I'm going to use the black ink to test all the others, because black ink is the best. So this is the red ink. With the light I can see kind of through it, so it's not blood red ink. Everything's in French. This says don't mix different inks for whatever reason, and I think something about rinsing the pen here. So we're not going to mix the inks, and we will rinse the pens. So I'll start off with this nib, which is a Hero Leonard made in England P8. Probably this is too small and the lighting isn't good enough to be able to see this, but made in England P8, and I guess Hero Leonard is the brand. The ink is quite light. You can see kind of through the ink. You can see it, the ink suspended in between the tines. So we'll do a nice big line. That is very nice. This is interesting. You can see the ink is held in the gap of the nib by, I think it's maybe capillary action, but that's very cool. Works much better when you're going along the flat edge. A quick note on the paper of this notebook. So often when you're reading or watching things about fountain pens, there's this obsession with having fountain pen friendly paper. And anytime I've used so-called fountain pen friendly paper, I haven't enjoyed it. And that's because what's deemed fountain pen friendly is paper that is like super high gloss, or maybe not high gloss, but on the higher end of the gloss range. Usually it's just thicker, and the ink tends to sit on the top of it as opposed to being absorbed into the paper. I guess the point is that it doesn't feather into the paper. You have the line of the ink looks crisp, but you don't get any of that feedback. And to me, the feedback of the pen scratching on the paper is kind of the information you get telling you you're using pen on paper. And this Japanese paper is the best. Many Japanese manufacturers have similar kind of paper, but this one, even though I'm putting quite a lot of ink on here with this wide, broad nib, it's not feathering, but I still get the feedback from the paper. The red ink is maybe more on the pinkish side, I'd say, especially once it's dried. On the first stroke that I did here, it's still a bit, still quite wet. Just put down a huge amount of ink. Give the nib a good rinse. Go from red to violet next. You can see actually how much ink gets held in the nib. So I went pretty hard with the red up here at first. I'll try a bit of a softer touch. I mean, in just those two lines, I've used up all the ink that was in there, so I'd have to re-dip. It's a nice, vibrant color still, despite being a few decades old. I don't know if ink would have an expiry date. I guess maybe pigment might start clumping, and then the ink becomes kind of unusable because you can't push it through a fountain pen nib, for example. Okay, we've got this blue-black. It's kind of more on the green side of blue. Let's try some. In this diagonal direction, this pen is so smooth. I quite like this color. Sort of, if I had to choose a blue, this is what I'd go for. And finally, black ink. Oof. Black. I mean, there's no flex in this nib. I can press pretty hard and you just access more of the ink that's further back in the reservoir. So quite a gray black ink. It's very difficult to find black ink that is dark black and that stays dark black. But this one kind of dries a more gray. So those are all the colors. Those are all the inks. We'll stick with the black ink. Let's go to the back and we'll use this JB Malat number 23. It's an extra fine. I can see how you'd be more economical with your words if you were a writer and you had to use a dip pen because it is a process dipping every time. Now here is a very interesting nib. It looks like it's an italic nib, but then it's got this tape. It says tape on it right at the front here, but I'm not sure why. I'm not exactly sure how to use this. Maybe the tape part should be further back. So that's holding quite a lot of ink in it now. Maybe the purpose is the tip of this tape thing should just be at the tip of the nib itself, and it just slightly comes apart to let out. Can you control if I push this back further? That seems like it makes more sense. It's an italic nib, which I'm assuming there's a certain way to write with that. This is probably not it. Haven't had to re-dip this, so I can see this tape feature in its time probably was quite an improvement. Move on to this one. This is a P5. The fat one we started off with was a P8. This one's a Hero Leonard ink made in England again. These pens, I mean, some of them are so nice to write with. You just want to make lines like this. So here we've got another kind of extra fine looking nib. This looks like it's made in France. The intricacies of the nib are pretty interesting. Let's dip. I'm going to say this is going to be scratchy. Ooh, no. No. This nib, in contrast to this other extra fine one we used, this one is much smoother. It's still scratchy, but seems like it's been worn in. It's not holding much ink, probably because I'm flexing it too far and it's not clean enough. The ink does run off it pretty easily. This one is my favorite so far. Do some more with it. It is the right balance. This nib has a textured surface on the top, and I think that's so that there's a bit more surface area on the nib so that ink can cling to it more. So again, it's amazing the design of these things. They're quite intricate. I mean, it's just a stamped out piece of metal, but there's a lot that goes into it. You could just sit and look at this for like you'd look at a sculpture. So we've got another of these nibs with a cap on it of some sort. So this is made by Speedball, actually made by Hunt Manufacturing Company, Speedball brand. It's got this double nib, I'm guessing for to hold more ink. Load some ink. See. Wow, that ran out of ink really quickly. It's almost making a whistling noise on the paper. What I'd love to know is what all these nibs were used for. There's usually a specific reason that nibs are made in this way. For example, what would this three-tined kind of italic nib be used for? I don't know. Often it's like a draftsperson needed this for specific types of markings or indications on a drawing. So if you know what those are for, please let me know in the comments, because I'm very curious. Time for an italic nib. This one is a Hero Leonard, again, made in England, number 2. It's very interesting to see the different ways in which a reservoir is sort of trying to be attempted. So you can kind of see 4 different ways here. So these wide, broad ones, the folded nib makes the space within which the ink sits. Then we have this tape nib, where that extra cap, it's kind of doing the same, having the same function, but it's just a bit of a different design, and it's removable, so maybe easier to clean. Then you've got this kind of one where you've got texture on the nib, you've got these little keyholes to, again, with that capillary action, maybe they cling on to the ink better. Much kind of simpler design. And then this kind where you've got a little divot punched into the nib to hold the ink again. So if that's what these are for, if that's the sort of the driver behind these designs, it's a very interesting insight into the different ways, you know, the same problem is attempting to be solved. And you can see how this kind of leads into having a feed, and then to, you know, having a storage of ink within the pen that feeds into the nib, and how the construction of modern fountain pens comes about as a development of these sorts of nibs. So we'll use this one now. This is the italics one with the divot in it. And you can see it's clinging on to a pool of ink, and it's being funneled to the nib via this smaller channel that cuts across to the nib. Let's call this the pool nib. This is probably a good example of where the setting on fire of the nib did not do the best job of actually making it a clean, even surface, because you can see how the ink is pooling in different places, but across the front of the nib where it needs to be flowing, there's obviously still some oil there, so it's not coming across. And that is translating into less usability of the nib, I guess. Now this is a weird combination of things. It's got this big flat head, so we're obviously going to be putting down a lot of ink with this one. It's got the double cap to hold a lot of ink in between, and it looks like a duck's beak. In any case, it's another speedball one. Whoa. Now that is smooth. This is like curling. It reminds me for some reason of the brooms that they use in front of the curling ball as it goes down the ice. You know, this is the little broom that gets used to clear the ice, I suppose. I don't know. That's how curling works. You can definitely just pool the ink, put an enormous amount of ink down on the paper. This paper is, by the way, holding up tremendously well. Just look at all the ink I'm just slathering onto the page. There's no bleed through into the page behind it. You can only see it through because the paper itself is thin, but it's not coming through. You could easily write on the back of this page, and it's not, this page is not going to interfere with whatever you write on the back here. This way it's very smooth. This way less so. C6 speedball nib. Now we're getting somewhere. This is a good combination of, I'm able to flex this and get quite a variation of line thickness, but I'm not losing ink in pools as I was with some of the other flecks. I'm getting quite a fine line, and I can go really light and also put more pressure, and it holds up. It's sort of keeping up. This could actually be a writing nib, because you also don't have to dip it that frequently, as some of the others would require. I think I've only dipped this once and it's still going. I mean, obviously it's not putting ink down in blocks and blobs like this. Coming to the last nib, this says Hero, which there is that name on some of the other ones. The other ones say made in England. This one says Austria. H-I-R-O, Hero. Number 6. It's got that same pool where the ink should fill. Last one. This one is very fine. Finer nibs are scratchier. I don't mind. This does have a bit of flex in it, so you can see if I apply more pressure, it's creating wider lines. And here this pool in the nib seems to be working okay. Nib pool. So these bottles actually have an inbuilt pen holder. The glass is molded in a way that you have a divot. It will hold the pen that you're using nicely on it. All these things just look so nice. Thanks for sticking with me if you've made it this far. I enjoyed trying out all those nibs. Hopefully you found some use in that and enjoyed watching the video. If you did, like and subscribe. If you have any information about the nibs that is deeper than the sort of the surface information that I provided here, please leave that information in the comments. I'm super curious to see, and I'm sure anyone else watching the video will be keen to know about it as well. So do share. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.